Hello everyone and welcome to a new video. Today we have Mr. Jonathan Price with us, Chairman at Yanda. How are you, Jonathan, today?
Well, I'm recovering, Ilaria. As you may know, I was one of those unfortunate enough to suffer from COVID, but I'm gradually getting my energy and strength back. So hopefully I'll be able to manage to finish this interview.
That's good, we hope so. Especially because today's topic is stablecoin. Shall we start with the first question then?
Yeah, indeed.
So the most obvious one is, what are stablecoins?
Right. Well, if anybody's been paying any attention to the news recently, they will have heard about these types of coin called stable coins. These are cryptocurrency coins whose value is linked to or derived from some other type of asset, such as a fiat currency like US dollars or euros, or sometimes a commodity.
Okay, and which are the most important stablecoins?
Well, the most famous one is a stable coin called Tether, which the sign is USDT. And as its ticker suggests, it's a coin that is supposed to be worth the same as a US dollar. So the idea is that if you hold 100 Tether, then it's worth exactly the same as $100. So it's a sort of crypto equivalent of US dollars. US dollars, of course, being the most important currency in the world for both finance and trade and everything else. So the people who invented Tether, Tether Limited, decided to create a coin that was worth the same as a dollar because they thought that would be really useful.
What is not really clear to me is actually how can a tether be worth the same as a US dollar?
Well, this is the really interesting part of the question because Tether, when it started, was created in partnership with one of the really big cryptocurrency exchanges, an exchange called Bitfinex.
Mm-hmm.
And according to both Tether Limited and Bitfinex, each tether that was issued, each tether coin that was issued, was supposed to be backed by a real US dollar. That is to say that the tether company said that if they were going to issue 1 million tether, they would have $1 million US in a bank account backing it up, so people could be certain that it would be worth that amount. Well, of course, this is quite important because if you're going to accept a coin as being worth $1 on the basis that it's backed by dollars, it's really important to be able to check this. But the Tether company and Bitfinex didn't let any outside parties check. They refused to have any kind of proper audit done, so people couldn't check to see whether there was actually US dollars backing the tethers or not. And so there was a lot of questioning in the newspapers and elsewhere, a lot of doubt about whether the tether were actually backed by real dollars or not.
So what was the truth?
Well, good question. Nobody is 100% sure, but we do have some further information because in 2018, so 2 years ago, Bitfinex suffered a really major catastrophe because it had a huge amount of cryptocurrency on deposit with another crypto exchange based in Panama in Central America. And it came apparent all of a sudden that something had gone wrong, and this crypto exchange refused to give Bitfinex its money back. And so Bitfinex was suddenly 850 million US dollars short. Now, it's possible that there had been some government interference by the government, or it's possible that somebody had stolen the money. In fact, it seems quite likely now that somebody had actually stolen this money. But it left Bitfinex with a massive problem because if you lose that amount of money, of course, people start wanting their coins back. And if you can't pay them, then you're going to go bankrupt. So Bitfinex had to do something to cover this shortfall. So what it did was it borrowed the money from Tether. So $850 million of dollars that was supposed to be backing Tether was suddenly lent to Bitfinex to cover this hole in their balance sheet. So with the result was that the Tether was no longer actually backed by dollars. Now, the Bitfinex people and the Tether people said, well, it was still backed by dollar assets because the money was loaned to Bitfinex by Tether. And so the loans, which were denominated in US dollars, constituted dollar assets. So in fact, the Tether that were issued were still backed by something. It's just they weren't any longer backed by cash. They were just backed by assets. Unfortunately, although perhaps one can understand why to a certain degree, Tether didn't tell anybody about this. They basically lied to the general public and to investors about this. And so this is what's caused the problem.
They seem to be pretty private informations. How do we know all this?
Well, there'd been a lot of speculation about it for a long time, but we do have some definitive information now as a result of government action, because Bitfinex and Tether were both very active in New York in the US. And the New York State Attorney General was very unhappy with what she perceived as being untruths being told by Tether. So she instigated a lawsuit. She basically sued Tether and Bitfinex on behalf of the state of New York and carried out a legal investigation into them, into what they were doing. And this took her the best part of 2 years to complete. So it was a very thorough investigation. Anyway, this is suddenly all in the news last week because the parties, that's Bitfinex and Tether on one side, and the US Attorney General on the other, reached a settlement. So this is something that happens in the US. Sometimes if you've been accused of doing some wrongdoing, rather than ending up in court and you being fined or something, you can agree to settle with the authorities by paying a big fine, and then they bring the lawsuit to an end. And this is what happened. So the two parties managed to settle their lawsuit.
That's good, but that sounds like quite a problem for Tether, isn't it?
Yes, it was, because the settlement basically involved the Attorney General agreeing not to take any further action against either of them, either Bitfinex or Tether, providing Tether paid a fine of $18.5 million, and also that both of them agreed that they would never do any further business in New York State or with residents of New York State. And this is definitely a big problem for them, because New York is a big state with a big population. And of course, it is also the main financial center in America. So this means that Tether and Bitfinex are going to have their business limited in the US quite a bit. Interestingly, though, it didn't seem to affect the value of the Tether too much. Tether had, in the past, fluctuated in value. At one stage, it got down as low as 80 cents on the dollar, so nowhere near worth a dollar. But in the last year or so, it's been up there worth $1 or 99.9 cents, so almost $1, pretty consistently. And when this news of this settlement was issued in a press release last week, the value of Tether didn't actually drop at all. So today, Tether is still worth $1, and you can swap dollars for Tether and vice versa at very, very thin spreads. So it's still reasonably liquid.
That's a very, very interesting story. Is there anything else that we should know about Tether?
Well, it is an interesting story, not least because of the very, very harsh comments that the Attorney General made about Tether and Bitcoin. I mean, she didn't pull her punches. She said, accused them of lying and fraud, and clearly she was very, very unhappy about their behavior. But Tether is important nonetheless. Tether is really important for the liquidity of the whole cryptocurrency market, because Tether represents about 80% of all the stable coins. There are other stable coins based on dollars, and as I said, based on other things too, but Tether is by far the most important. And people often use Stellar to trade, Tether rather, to trade with Bitcoin and Ethereum and other cryptocurrencies, because it's actually quite difficult and tedious to trade with US dollars themselves. It's much easier to trade with Tether. So people like myself, for example, when I trade on Yanda and I want to trade Ethereum, my starting point is Tether. So I have Tether in my account and I trade Tether against Bitcoin or Tether against Ethereum, because it's much easier to do that. In fact, it's really difficult for me as a UK resident to have a US dollar account with a crypto exchange. So it's much easier for me to trade from Tether. So as a result, Tether underpins the liquidity of a great deal of trading in the crypto market. So if something happened to Tether, it would be a big problem for the other coins as well. And as long as Tether has this 80% dominance of stable coins, that's likely to continue. I mean, Tether perhaps isn't the best of the US dollar stable coins. You could, from a technical point of view, easily make a case that one or two of the others are better. But for the moment, Tether has the quantity there. There are more Tethers in issue by a long way than any of the other stable coins, which helps make it a liquid market.
That's good. Well, I don't have any other questions for you. Would you like to add anything?
No, except to say that I think this subject of stablecoins is really interesting. So I think it might be worthwhile having a second interview next week where we look at some other stablecoins, perhaps some of the stablecoins based on gold, because that's also clearly very interesting for people.
Absolutely, 100%. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for joining us today. And I will see you guys all in the next video. Thank you.
Yeah, see you next week then. Have a good weekend, Ilaria. Bye.
You too. Bye-bye.